Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. And this time round, we're returning to the world of Woolball with Rise of the Woolball. This is a sequel to Shadow of the Woolball, which I covered last year, I think, and enjoyed tremendously. It was a mod that took a lot of inspiration from Wolfenstein and dressed it up in this gorgeous, adorable cartoon style that put you in the shoes of Scott the Hedgehog rescuing his girlfriend Rebecca. But this time, Rise of the Woolball flips the script a little and puts you in the skater shoes of Rebecca herself, because it seems that the Kitty Empire, the villains of the first game, were not thoroughly and completely defeated. And as Rebecca is about to find out with this really just awesome little bit of animation here, that Scott is in a little bit of trouble. Long story short, Scott now needs rescuing from the evil Kitty Empire, who have also managed to split this rather lovely planet into 3 chunks, all in the pursuit of mining material that they can use to poop in. No, I am not joking. They are literally strip mining the planet for kitty litter. Story aside, you may also notice that there's a few interesting additions here that weren't present in Shadow of the Woolball, and that would be the inclusion of these hovering balloon pads here, and springy, bouncy mushrooms which you can use to reach those higher vantage points. These should also give you a clue to the inspiration behind this particular entry, and if you guessed Rise of the Triad, then you, my friend, are right on the money. As you can imagine, this lends a fair amount of verticality to most of the levels here in Rise of the Woolball, expanding them, enabling them to be a little bit more complex, especially in comparison to the more flat and simplistic layouts of Shadow of the Woolball. These new additions, however, do come with their own particular drawbacks, especially the mushrooms. If you're not careful, it can fling you straight into the ceiling and cause you to lose a little bit of health, so make sure you regard those with a bit of care. If they've got a white stem, you're free to bounce. If they're pink, they're probably going to crack your skull against the ceiling, which just isn't good for anybody. Taking advantage of the extra headroom here, you'll find that there's a slight expansion to the enemy roster with the Hella Kitty here, which can fire cannonballs at a distance and drop barrels a little closer, both of which you don't really want to be getting hit with at all. We've also got some new hazards, such as the spiked yarn ball here, which will roll around its particular area, dealing quite a lot of punishment if you're unfortunate enough to get caught up in its path. And of course, we have the return of what is essentially Cat Hitler. Now sporting the cone of shame after being put back together from his defeat in the previous game, he tries to taunt us via vid-screen, but of course we can still blow them up. A touch which amused the hell out of me last time, and a touch I'm very happy to see present and accounted for here. I think one of the things I like the most about the Woolball mods is that they generally keep things simple while also having just oodles of personality. I mean, where else are you gonna get a level that's basically an evil kitty workout gym? But underneath wonderful quirks such as that, the song pretty much remains the same. You're navigating the level in search of colored keys for colored doors in order to eventually hit the shutdown button and escape while everything explodes behind you. The quirk here, however, something that I'm not quite sure was a feature of the original Shadow of the Woolball, is that you're given the opportunity to hit the shutdown button early. Naturally, for several reasons, that is a terrible idea. Firstly, because you're going to have to fight through all of the enemies you haven't encountered yet on your way to the emergency exit, and secondly, the emergency exit itself may still be locked behind a colored key door. Now, this situation may not be the case across every single level here in Rise of the Woolball, but it certainly happens enough to encourage you to thoroughly explore each level you come across before you go ahead and hit that big shutdown button. Much like the original Woolball, you'll be rescuing various cute and fuzzy animals during the course of a level, but occasionally you'll also run into a character such as this. So this is Barbara. Barbara is a hovering telekinetic sheep that's been cruelly ensnared by the evil Kitty Empire, and of course, we're gonna have to free Barbara, because in order to reach the next episode of this mod, we need her telekinetic abilities in order to fly over to the other chunk of this broken planet to continue the story. And I gotta say, my face was pretty much the same as Rebecca's at the bottom here when I first ran into this particular character. But thankfully, elements like these don't overpower Rise of the Woolball. Even though there's heavier story elements, most of these interactions are pretty short and sweet and to the point, and it's not long before you're cracking on, getting down to business, and picking up an exploding cucumber launcher. Yes, you heard me right, that is the weapon which we now wield. You may be wondering, what exactly does the exploding cucumber launcher do? And I am happy to inform you it does exactly what it says on the tin. If I'm gonna be honest, it's pretty much a rocket launcher replacement, just with added hilarity. And you know what? I can't complain. It's simple, it's to the point, it blows things up nice and good just with cucumbers instead of cannonballs or rockets. It's also a weapon that gives you good incentive to go hunting for those elusive secret areas, because with secret areas usually comes imprisoned animals, and when you free them, they have a high likelihood of leaving behind cucumbers. Piles of them. Because of course they do. But guess what? You're gonna need each and every one of those exploding cucumbers, because you're gonna be facing off against terrifying bosses such as this overweight sumo cat. A sumo cat called Meowzeki. But don't let that fool you, this is actually a pretty cool boss battle. I mean, in Shadow of the Woolball, the boss battles were functional, they were pretty decent, but here they have certainly raised the game. I mean, Meowzeki here can chuck barbells at you, he can flatten you with his butt if he lands directly on you, and also he can turn the floor into lava. So yeah, fair few things to look out for when fighting against this one, and I'd be lying if I said I did this first try. It took me a few goes to figure out the extent of Meowzeki's moves, and I gotta say the worst one out of all of them has to be the distance he can leap just to inflict some of that butt-slamming damage. Everything else, mostly fine, but boy, that ass. That ass. So where exactly do you go after the giddy highs of using an exploding cucumber launcher against an overweight sumo cat? Well, let me tell you, this is precisely where you go next. You pick up a gun that has a bird strapped to the top of it, and you fire bird crap relentlessly at your enemies. And I have to say, I spent a good 5 minutes or so giggling like a crazy person at the animation of this gun every single time I fired it. It is perfect. As far as replacements for the plasma gun go, this is quite possibly the most perfect thing I have ever seen. But aside from allowing you to crap all over your enemies, Rise of the Woolball also introduces a few nifty spins on old concepts. So the wind tunnel, for example, would normally fling you down a hallway, but here it will bounce you off the ceiling, forcing you to time your movements in order to avoid some precarious spikes. And it will also introduce you to nice little Easter eggs, such as this endlessly spinning cat, who screams like one of the headless suicide bombers from Serious Sam. You can't put him out of his misery. He's just going to be stuck spinning there forever, surrounded by fragments of bird poo. Pray for that poor soul, because that's all you can do. One thing that I really appreciate about Rise of the Woolball is that it takes concepts such as this here, and it doesn't just relegate them to a one-off. You'll see this concept return in future levels with a few elements mixed in just to make it a little bit more interesting. So you'll get variations with lava pits to some sides, or with different combinations of enemies. It's always finding a way to keep such a simple concept interesting to play through. Speaking of interesting, ever wondered what it's like to wade through a kitty litter disposal room before it crushes you against the ceiling? Me neither, but it's in there anyway. Now when it comes to the second boss battle here in Rise of the Woolball, I was expecting something that might conform a little more closely to the template laid out by the first boss battle, but that is where I was sorely mistaken. You see, this doesn't take place in a typical arena. This takes place on a skateboard circuit. Seriously, how cool is this? I was not expecting this from a boss battle at all. And you'd think that being flung into this would be a little jarring, but thankfully the game lets you into this situation a little bit more gently than you might imagine. You see, in the lead up to this encounter, you have the opportunity to do a few dry runs of this circuit, and that's under the context of rescuing a few adorable baby lambs. Well, of course they're baby lambs. Lambs are baby sheep, but regardless, it allows you to make a few mistakes, bump into a few bits of geometry during the course of the circuit, and by the time you actually get round to fighting the boss, you look like you're actually competent at what you're doing. Trust me, you don't want to see what I was doing before I got to this point. Also, you may notice that certain weapons don't really work as they should, and that's largely the projectile weapons here. I'm not sure why, it might be something to do with the physics of the game, but things like the cucumber launcher and bird poo launcher, they're not really viable during this fight, but thankfully things like the chain gun, the shotgun here, and the pistol all work mighty fine. If you're a fan of secret levels, well, guess what? Rise of the Woolball has you covered. As far as I can tell, there's a secret level per episode here, bringing the count to 3, and if you find the 3rd episode secret level, you get to play Shadow of the Hedgelord, which puts you in the shoes of, I imagine, a Kitty Empire soldier, because all of the enemies in here are actually evil hedgehogs, and it's a wonderful callback to the original Wolfenstein, and of course the original Shadow of the Woolball itself. So yeah, as you can probably tell, the other secret level I discovered is pirate themed. I think it takes place on some kind of ship, or on something that at the very least is careening across water, so I guess that qualifies as a ship. And if you listen closely, you can also hear that the soundtrack to this level is a version of Keelhauled by Ailstorm, just upping the piratey credentials of this level to the adequate levels. Not to mention, if you look closely, you'll find a lot of the enemies here are actually wearing the appropriate piratey attire. Now you're probably thinking, gee Icarus, that seems like a lot of effort just to put into a secret level that not everyone will get to experience on their first run through, but just think, that level of effort that we've got going on here, that is evenly applied across the entirety of Rise of the Woolball. You can see it in every level, you can see it in every sprite, in every animation. It's even present in the friggin' intermission screens. That's how much quality we are dealing with here. It is that goddamn great of a mod. It genuinely pains me that I can't show you more of this in the time that I've got allotted to a regular edition of Doom Mod Madness, but I can assure you it is well worth the trip. It's beautifully designed, it's tremendously well paced, and good grief, I haven't even gotten to that final boss yet. Ooh, and let me tell you, it's a heck of a doozy. Good grief, this one kicked my ass for a fair few tries. This is what final bosses should feel like, and much like the others, it's different. It's completely out of left field, and it's just tremendously fun to battle against. If you're interested in giving Rise of the Woolball a whirl for yourself, and good grief you should, the link, as usual, is in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments below, and feel free to suggest any mod you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus, desperately trying to stop a giant mecha cat from flipping me off with cannonball shots. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.